Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another indie author interview with your host, Xander Phanes, and under the order of the Bookish. My name is Xander Phanes. My pronouns are they, them. I am the author of Doppelganger and the artist of a small comic on Webtoon called The Cleft. And I am incredibly grateful and honored to be interviewing a fellow author and I say a good friend as well. So
Absolutely.
I'll turn the floor to you and just tell us a little bit about you and your name, pronouns, and about you as an author.
Thanks. I'm Qualia Reed. I'm an author in Canada. I write a lot of queer sci-fi, fantasy, romance. I'm working on some cozy horror. I kind of like to do a little bit of everything because I just really like writing in general. So I just write whatever I feel like all the time. And that's one of the things I love about being an indie author. Largely, I'm obsessed with a queer space opera about an android named Esmeralda 09B, and she kind of works her way into the majority of my stories. But other than that, yeah, I just sort of like write a bit about everything.
I heard you mention that you write across genres and I
Mm.
too kind of, I don't know if this is an indie author thing, or maybe it's just a select few of us. I have no idea, but I also kind of struggle with naming, putting genres to my work. I don't think about genres until all the way at the end where I want to connect my story to the like target audience or readers, let's say. Um,
Totally.
so and I just thought that was kind of interesting that I'm seeing that across multiple indie authors.
Mm. I think there's something inherently queer about it as well. Especially for me, it relates a lot to my life experience of like why I never wanted to be. I mean, have since come out as non-binary and prefer they them pronouns, but there was many times in my adolescence where I thought I was a gay man, but that never felt right for reasons that took me 20 years to understand. But the big thing for me is not being defined by labels, and I was always drawn to stories that were also not defined by labels. I like a lot of space stories, but a lot of the time, uh, they're just the ones that I like the most are ones that blend genres, and we blend genres every day in our daily lives. So why can't our stories blend genres? And it's so interesting because so many people, largely, other authors or people who like to see themselves as art gatekeepers will be like, you have to write a specific genre to build your audience. Whereas like the last book fair I attended, I think I sold some of the most books at the whole book fair because I had six books spread out across this table, and it was literally I had organized them into a spectrum of genres.
Mm,
And so like in a general public, they haven't come specifically to see me. They're just wandering around. I've got a little bit of something for everybody at that
mm,
point. And it's just funny because when I started out, I assumed that that was going to be to my detriment, but I did it anyway because that's the way I want to do it. And same with my covers, even my book covers are often wildly different. Some are like dark and muted, and some are bright and colorful. And whereas some authors you see, it's like every book on the table looks like it fits a
same,
theme, which
yeah.
can look really nice. That can really work, especially in one series. But then it's to see this kaleidoscope of things going on, I think is like eye-catching to some people.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I noticed that a lot online on Instagram specifically, when I kind of now that you mention it, when I do look at your Instagram feed, I do see that, or your profile, there's a wide kind of art style and different, like, how do I say this? different perspectives and themes to the book covers too. I didn't think about that. That was actually a really good
Yeah.
connection. And especially connecting that to why didn't I think of that before? Like, yeah, um I guess Xander Phanes as a non-binary indie author and artist, who's
Mhm.
also not part of the dominant culture. I'm from a different cultural background. And Qualia Reed, who is also a non-binary indie author, we both have that kind of in common where our identities don't exactly fit the mold for anything. And so do our stories too. They don't really fit the mold. Um, but you know what? We're winning. Um,
Oh, I think if you ripped us out of our bodies, we'd have these two little souls that would just sit there and conspire together.
Probably, yeah. I really think that's what's happening, like right now.
Yeah, I agree. And like if you've already done the personal work in your life to be like, I am outside of this binary, why can't my stories, you know, I can break free of the binary, but I've got to keep all of my writing just to literary fiction. Why burn yourself out? Write
Yeah.
about what you like to, I'm writing a completely different story right now that my brain decided to force me to write because I kept dreaming about it.
Oh, I remember reading that actually. I wanted to ask you the second question is a little bit about your work, your recent or upcoming work. But I do remember you mentioning something like that on your Instagram stories.
Yeah, that's my brain for you. I woke up, I went to bed at about 10:30, woke up at 1:30 after having this vivid dream of this story, and I was like, okay, I rolled over, wrote a bunch of it down. Like we're talking like a basic plot outline of the whole story. And then I fell back asleep about 20 minutes later. Uh, and then literally my brain just put me right back where I left off in that dream.
That's
And then
insane.
I
Oh my goodness.
woke up like an hour later and did the same thing, wrote a bunch more of it, went back to sleep. It happened 5 times. My brain kept putting me right back into the same storyline. We're talking like vivid dreams with fleshed out characters and like, yeah, it was bizarre.
That's
So that's
incredible.
definitely it. And that's going to be something like I haven't written before. It's going to be climate fiction,
Mm,
and it's going to be like yeah, climate fiction, sci-fi, uh, really like heavy character focused dramatic story that is, at this point has a working title of I think she's in a cult.
I love it
And it's gonna
actually.
gonna take place in this like West Coasty kind of city after, the climate apocalypse, basically.
Hmm.
It's gonna be kind of dystopian. This kid, a non-binary person has like struggled to get to university and is now in university trying their best to like get a degree so they can at least like not be on food stamps anymore, find some
Mm,
kind of job in the rapidly destabilizing world,
mm,
and then meets this person that they were in grade school with and had been completely in love with, thought they were soulmates, but then never gathered up the courage to speak with. They lost touch because they never really spoke much. They bump into this girl again in university and she's studying to be a doctor, and they reconnect and start dating, and she kind of explains that she's queer and non-binary and polyamorous,
mm.
and she lives with kind of an alternative family structure. And he like, oh, that's all those things sound so exciting. And then like meets like a friend later. Oh, she's in my, whatever chemistry class. Dude, stay away from that girl. She's in a cult. Uh,
Oh,
and
so she's
so
in the
like,
cult.
yeah, so the story, the title is like referring to, I think she's in a cult. And so the story is this like almost cozy horror of like there's horror elements where you're like almost getting jump scares of like,
Mm.
is this story gonna like go into this like crazy cult scenario? I won't spoil anything, but
I
that's
want to
kind of
know
like
more.
where yeah, that's where the story is going to be at, and it's going to be like super queer, super poly, uh, and like rooted in this like climate
Mm,
fiction. Climate change has rapidly turned the world into a dystopia, and yeah, like all of that came out of this dream that I just kept having the one night,
mhm.
and so like I try to listen to my head now and just write what my brain wants to write.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's incredible. I think I remember hearing this years ago. Like there's this uh, emerging genre called cli-fi, like climate
Mhm.
fiction or climate
Yeah.
science fiction. But to kind of merge that with to kind of have the context of climate change, which is on the minds of so, especially, later, the more recent generations. It's like an extra layer of stress on so many people's minds, especially with this generation. Um,
Yeah.
and to add the layers of uh, queerness and also to add the layer of I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing some whenever I think of like cults or the character, because we think she's in a cult. I also thought of these like religious or not really religious, but some sort of spiritual underpinnings to it, which I am also
Oh,
incredibly
totally.
interested in. And a lot of my stories actually have I don't want to say religious layers underneath, but some sort of connection and exploration of
Mhm.
spirituality and uh, here we are again outside of labels and kind of just being non-binary, but um, having a non-binary experience with spirituality and religion. I do see that in my work too, and I'm actually really excited for the story. It
I mean, I think
sounds awesome.
I think that especially your work with the cleft, I get total, various cultural iconography
Yeah,
glimpses just in your art.
thank you.
I could totally see that. And the cleft, yeah, is very like non-binary spiritual. I love the
Yeah,
way that you do that, the way that you write like that. It's so interesting, and yeah, it's always something that I enjoy seeing.
thank you so much for for mentioning that. That really brought so much joy to my heart because when I share my work and put it out there, and I've got a lot of like messages for my novella Doppelganger, and that made me so happy. And when I see those kind of messages from readers, I don't get many messages from readers for The Cleft, but my webcomic on Webtoon. But to hear you say that kind of really makes me feel so fulfilled and accomplished because I am actually kind of trying to cultivate that religious and spiritual how do I say this? Religious and spiritual challenge, I guess, in the cleft that
Mhm.
also has something to do with I don't want to say the climate, but the connection between spirituality and nature.
I
Um,
see that for sure. That
yeah,
stands out huge in the cleft.
I don't want to
And I
spoil
can
it.
see it even just in the way that you draw the environment or the way that you create the environments in the cleft. Like your trees or the work you do on your trees is so beautiful, and the nature,
Thank
the
you.
the like physical love that I can sense that you have for nature just shines through in the cleft.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. I'm a tree hugger. I love trees and just to give some context, yeah, the my main character in the story, their name is Navi and they're also non-binary. And another character in the story is actually a tree. Um and I became so obsessed with birch trees because they look like they have eyes
Mhm.
and they sort of tend to branch uh from the bottom instead of from a main stem.
Mhm.
And I also love like they don't have bark. They just have this woody stem with what looks like eyes. So I
Mhm.
try to kind of give character to to this birch tree through emotions and her eyes, basically. But this isn't my interview, it's yours.
I love
Um,
that you referred to yourself as a tree hugger because I definitely am a tree hugger.
I love
Um,
trees.
just even the other day, I had that picture on Instagram where I
Oh
was
my God, I
touching a
saw
tree.
that. Yeah.
And it's like, not to sound like one of the olds, but definitely in terms of the internet, I remember when a lot of the internet came out. I'm an elder millennial at this point, and the first time that I was arrested for protesting
Mm.
was when I was 11 years old.
Oh,
I laid on
wow.
a log. I laid with a group of people on a logging road at 11 years old
Mm.
to prevent the destruction of the temperate rainforest here
Mm-hmm.
where I live. Um, and so this is why it's always funny to me, when the generations above me, the Gen X and the Boomers are like, oh, acting surprised about climate change, or it's like that's some of my earliest memories as being in like grade 2, and they're like having scientists coming in and being like, it's coming.
Yeah.
We already know this. This was in the 80s. And
Yeah.
so it's like, but the millennial generation was just so disadvantaged right from the beginning, and that the boomers completely outnumbered us. There was no political means to ever have any effect. And I say often the best thing millennials can do at this point is just to get out of the way,
Mm.
assist Gen A and Gen Z where we can, and stay out of their way. Because
Mm.
now I'm already over the age gap where, as you hit your 40s and 50s, your brain starts having different priorities, you
Mm.
know? And so, like, a lot of change does need to be created by young people uh, who are still full of that rage,
Mm. I
uh,
hear.
to rage to turn into action. And so, like, yeah, like, I'm not going to burn that gas station down, but if you need a pack of matches, I've got one here for you.
I
That
hear
kind of
you.
stuff.
Yeah.
And so, like, climate always factors into my writing, and nature, the love of nature,
Mm.
especially. Though less in some of these sci-fi stories because a lot of them take place in spaceships. But like Esmeralda's journey, there's always mentions to beloved trees
Mm.
and flowers and things like that, because I have been extremely fortunate by my winning the birth lottery of being born on a
Mm.
place called Vancouver Island, which is off the west coast of Canada, where I live in one of the world's only temperate rainforests.
Mm.
So, I can walk an hour. I can literally walk out my door and walk up into the hills, and I'm in a beautiful forest.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel very fortunate about that. But it definitely feeds into my writing in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And I do see that in your work with especially when you kind of describe well, I don't want to spoil it, but Athlon, let's say,
Mm,
and the kind of uh reminiscing about Athlon and the world and culture and
yeah.
the natural world of Athlon. And there's when I read your work, there's I can't help but feel a sense of like uh loss, and a bit of grief. But in a way that kind of transforms, I feel like your work and writing transforms that loss and grief um into something meaningful. And I also do want to um like echo that what you mentioned about, because we both have background in psychology and counseling, and I definitely agree with you that we have different stages of development, and it's totally
Mhm.
okay for our priorities to shift when we kind of uh, you know finish one rite of passage and move on to another. Each developmental stage has its own rite of passage, and each developmental stage has its own priorities. And um, that's something I didn't actually think about, where each generation is in its own specific developmental stage, and we can
Mhm.
kind of complement each other in terms of
Totally.
action. Absolutely.
like the elder millennial generation at this point, someone like myself, you know, I'm privileged enough to have the education level that I've attained and continuing to focus on.
Definitely, it is.
I live in a rural-ish area of the
Mm-hmm.
world where there's, this entire island, I think is 100,000 people living on it. No, more than that, but like not a ton, right? I want to go to university. I apply to go to university. I go to university. It's not like places in the States where there's a 5-year wait
Yes.
list.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's that piece to it, but then it's like a lot of the time lately, I'm just like, well, how can I be actually of best use,
Mm.
right? The, you know, you get to, you can't expect a 70-year-old, to be on the front lines the way you would be. Like when I was 18, I was, sleeping in the park and, I can feel like super confident giving everything I have to, movements that mean a lot to me. Uh, because I didn't have that was my life, and I was content with that. All I wanted to do was write poetry and, you know, try my best to make change through activism and stuff like that. Whereas now, in my 40s, I have a 4-year-old kid. Like, it's just not, I can't get arrested
I
because
hear
I'll
you.
lose my job and then I can't provide for my 4-year-old and then my life spirals. But like, what can I do? I can support the kids that are still in that position to do that, emotionally, financially. I try like even just like having a tiny bit of disposable income. I just try to just, redistribute the wealth where I can. So like
Mm.
basically the only books I buy are indie authors. Like
Yeah.
somebody, I see somebody's Instagram and they're a self-published author, they're writing some kind of queer sci-fi or queer fantasy. I'll just buy it. I may not even get to read it right away. It'll end up in my massive, TBR
TBR
pile. But
file.
like,
Yeah. I
I'll
definitely
just
get
do
you.
it. And if they've got like a coffee or a GoFundMe or whatever,
Mm.
I'll throw some money at it because it's like I just want to help support people. And even, taking this back to, my growing psychological background in terms of my education, it's like I'm inspired. I've always, before I even studied psychology, I was a firm believer in giving people unconditional positive regard
Mm-hmm.
because this world can just be such a miserable place.
It's
And I like to
crushing.
make this distinction, especially in my writing, but I make this distinction often as well as when when you say like, man, this world's going to hell or something like that, and somebody goes, that's just what the world is like. I always like to interrupt that statement because you can break that cycle. That's an opportunity to break the cycle and be like, actually, the world has nothing to do with it. Like, walk out into the woods for an hour and the world has nothing to
Suddenly,
do with
yeah.
it. So there's the world, the objective reality, and then there's the human civilization that is occupying the world.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like it's a semantics thing, but it's like the world has nothing. Don't blame the world because the world is the natural state of being. Reframe the thought to this is what we collectively are building every single day, and that is constructive because it's like this is something we collectively are doing, we can undo it. It's
Mm-hmm.
not this is the reality that's completely unchangeable. We can't, change the movement of tectonic plates. We can't stop the planet from rotating. We
Mm.
can't stop, the forest from being the forest, but we can stop the way we treat the forest and we can stop the way we treat each other and the way we treat ourselves. And so I do like to make that distinction between like the defeatism, which I think a lot of people are left with right now in our civilization,
Absolutely.
um, and try to make it more constructive. And that's something I've rallied about recently with people who want to gatekeep art,
Mm.
and I've experienced that from people that I know that are people who have gone to school for like they've got a master's or a doctorate in fine arts.
Well, good for them.
And
Yeah.
yeah, good for them. And it's, you know, great. I would probably do a degree in art if I
Yeah,
had the time and money as well. But it's like a lot of people get to that level then and then feel like they have earned this right to tell other people what art is or
yeah,
is not. And it's like, oh, you're only a writer if you're writing poetry or if you're writing, you know, War and Peace
yeah.
kind
Or
of
if
stuff,
you're
like head
traditionally
literary
publishing.
fiction only, or if you're traditionally publishing. It's like,
Mm,
so
yeah,
what? Everybody from cave paintings to now, if you are doing something that is creatively expressing yourself, you're an artist. If you write words on paper or on a computer or wherever, you're a writer. And it's like everything beyond that is your subjective interpretation of the words of the language that you're using. It's like if you identify as X, you are X.
mm,
So it's like I just yeah, I get riled up about people who gatekeep art and like
yeah,
you know, you and I writing in the genres that we tend to write in, you know, we're never going to be Stephen King because of that, unless there's massive change.
but
Because
I
the
don't want to
second
be
you start
Stephen
writing,
King.
well, that's it. So like, I don't want to write something other than what I'm writing. I'm going to
Yeah,
write stories with weird plot elements and a lot of queer characters and the non-binary trans experience and stuff that is meaningful to me, you know, as a non-binary trans femme person. And like, I just don't care. I don't care
yeah,
if I make money. And I think there's a real danger in getting into writing, thinking, oh, I'm gonna write all this, I'm gonna get all this and make all this money
yeah.
writing.
It's very
And you're just like,
sensationalized.
yeah, and you're
You
taking away from like what it's supposed to be about. I read a little clip from music producer Rick Rubin's new book, and one of the things that stuck out to me was he said, just make art because you want to make art and then share it if you love it.
Yeah.
But don't make art for other people that you're not connected to whatsoever, because it's never going to be your best work at that point because you're just so removed from the whole thing.
Mm, absolutely.
You know, and a talented artist can, you know, throw stuff off in the minute. It's still beautiful to look at. You know, I have friends that are, you know, professional tattoo artists and they
Mm,
may not feel super connected to every piece, but they're still doing great work. But like for me, you know, and it's the volume too, right? There's like over a million authors in North America right now, and there's maybe a you know couple dozen book deals every
yeah,
year. So
yeah,
like you could
definitely.
try to mass market. That's why they all want to have AI writing because then it's like they're just going to tell the AI hit all these check boxes. It'll probably be garbage, but it'll maybe because it has the 10 things on the checklist, there the algorithm will sell it in a way that people then read it. They may not love it, but they might be like, yeah, it was okay. And it'll make them enough money to keep the it's okay system going.
Yeah,
Whereas like I'd
it
rather be
feels
in a
empty.
niche.
Mm,
Yeah, I'm happy self-publishing. I'm happy self-editing. You know, would I like to have you know, a high-powered editor? Sure, but don't make any money at this, and so I can't afford most of the time to hire, you know, an editor for
mm,
$5,000 to edit my work. But I can teach myself how to edit better based on the mistakes I make on previous works. And the best thing about self-publishing is I can just re-edit the other
yes.
manuscripts, and now it's better for the next edition. And having read almost exclusively indie authors for this year, you know, there's more spelling and grammar mistakes than, you know, something HarperCollins is going to push out. But every single one of them, even the ones that I wasn't in love with, I was like, that was just so different. It
Mm,
felt new. It felt fresh in a way that almost nothing that I'm reading in the last 10 years from a major publisher feels like. And so I'm much more happy to read indie stuff, you know, and the whole like, oh, if I see one spelling mistake, I'm going to turn it off. And it's like, it's just ableist, you know, you're
absolutely.
still reading the story. it's like those memes where it's like the letters are even backwards, but your brain still read the sentence.
Yeah,
It's like it doesn't matter if the
it's really
word
not a big deal.
has you got some occasional spelling mistakes. Who cares? Did you like the story? Right?
That's the
And
important
that's it for
question.
me. Even if the story has a couple of plot elements that I found completely fresh, I still am walking away from that story like, that was awesome. I liked it. It was
Mm,
great. You
absolutely.
know, the internet can create this false equivalency where we have to be like, if it's not the best thing in the world, then it's not worth your effort. And in the flip side of that, the internet only focuses on whatever the algorithm is saying the absolute worst thing in the world is,
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
true.
It's like when you see all the coverage of the various conflicts that are going on, not that I want to go into,
Mm,
huge details about any of it, but it's never, the internet is never, on fire with all of the conflicts at once. It just focuses on one thing at a time. And it's like there's multiple bad things happening all the time. And but it's just the nature of the algorithms that
we
we're
get
being
narrow,
subjected to.
kind of
It's like there's
narrow
one good
sighted.
thing and one bad thing, and then it feels like it balances out for a lot
Mm,
of people instead of realizing that everything is a multifaceted picture. Because the more you think about it like that, the more you have to then have critical thinking, and a lot of what's going on is just trying to make people not have critical thinking.
mm, absolutely. And I actually wanted
That's
to echo that a little bit. And I feel like you answered my question before I even asked it, which is like what kind of tips and tricks do you have for upcoming and emerging authors? And I feel like what
mm,
I've heard you say is don't listen to the gatekeepers. That's one thing.
yeah,
And another thing is if if you if you enjoy what you're doing and you're happy with it and you're okay with sharing it, some people just like to write and not share it, and that's totally valid too. But if
totally,
you're okay with sharing
totally.
it, put it out there. It doesn't have to be perfect, you know?
Hmm.
And someone
Share it
will,
because you want to. That's the
yeah,
only reason. Share it because you want to or don't. But like, yeah, that's the gatekeeping is like nobody, it's all valid or none of it's valid. It's kind of like existentialism in that point is like there is no meaning. So the meaning is yours to create. And so all art is valid
yeah,
because
absolutely.
it art mean the three-letter word art in the English language is going to mean something different than the basic concept of art means in several different languages.
Mm.
The whole thing about language is that it is which is so funny being non-binary. You hear people going off about the pronouns things or oh they them pronouns. It's like all language forever is fluid. There's no such thing as a static language. It changes constantly. So like, oh, that's a made up word. They're all made up words.
Yeah, it's
That's the
just
point.
sounds. I'm just making a sound
It's
and
how
and
we learn
somehow
to
you
communicate
understand
with
it,
each other.
you know?
Yeah,
Language is made
exactly.
up.
Yeah,
Language
it's
is
all
made
made
up,
up.
and
And it's just supposed to be a way for us to communicate abstract concepts to each other, you know? And so it just that needs to stop. If I was going to give anybody a tip, it would just be just create the things that close your eyes and how do you want to express yourself? It's fashion or it's painting or it's sculpting or it's writing, you know, write it. For me, it was like write it. Do you think you could do better? Well, then make it better, work on it, practice it.
mm,
We live in the golden age of, finding ways to get better online. There's free classes,
yeah,
there's
absolutely.
free books, whether you gotta go to a library and steal a book on how to be a better writer, get out
Yeah.
there and do it. You know, the, the idea that you have to be published traditionally to be a writer is insane in a world where there's millions of authors. Like the beauty of self-publishing is that you know, probably won't sell as much as Stephen King or J.K. Rowling, but like
I don't,
it's
it
it's
depends
to
on
the
what your
point where you
goals
can't
are.
even. yeah, and people like using J.K. Rowling, who's probably sold more books than almost every writer who ever lived. You know, it's like talking about worldwide gun violence and then bringing America into it is like it's such a statistical outlier, like it devalues the graph. So
I
just
see what you mean.
remove that from the situation completely, otherwise there's no point in talking about it. So it's like I read somewhere recently and there was like the majority of authors sell like 3,000 copies ever. And that's I think
Hmm.
traditionally published authors sell on average 3,000 copies. And I'm like, I am just some quiet little they in my apartment,
Quite little bit.
self self-publishing for fun, and trying my best with no marketing background to market these little stories via social media with a very limited audience online because I'm not paying for advertisements or whatever. So it's basically word of mouth or digital word of mouth. And just this year, I've probably had like almost 3,000 copies of my six kind of things go out.
That's insane.
And
And
like,
if only 1,000 people like actually go through and read it, and 500 of these people reach out to you and express to you how your work has affected them, that's 500 people, you know?
I mean, honestly, I've said to you before, even if I'm just writing these stories for you at this point, I'm pretty happy with that, honestly. I mean,
What
I
a
named
way.
one of my I named one of my characters Xander. Just because of how much your support meant to me this year. And it's amazing to me to think that, because I'm self-publishing,
Hmm.
I published an anthology, two novels, several novellas just this year. And one of the things too, people go, "Oh, how do you deal with writer's block?" Or how do you deal with, "Oh, I don't know what to write." It's just start writing. Don't stop. And one of my favorite quotes, I forget which famous author said it. Somebody was like, "How how do you keep yourself from quitting being a writer when it gets frustrating?" And the author was like, "If you can quit this, please quit. Trust me. It
What a
is
way to,
it is the
yeah.
most isolating hobby you could ever have in your life. To be a prolific author, you basically have to spend a large amount of time by yourself."
Yeah, and that's what a way to kind of I guess conclude the interview. I wanted to thank you for being here, and thank you everyone for listening. And thank you, Tia from Order of the Bookish, for creating this safe
Yeah,
platform
thanks.
for us. And we hope you enjoyed, and just tell us about your experience down in the comments below.